Hello and welcome to the Debating Toastcast, a podcast about all things debating, from the Debate Toastmasters Club 104 London Debaters. On Tuesday, the 23rd of April in this year, 2023, we had a debate at 104 London Debaters where the motion was, "This House believes kindness is more important than justice." Now, we always take two votes at a debate meeting, one before and then one after, to see how much difference the debate made to the people's response to the motion. And on this particular motion, kindness is more important than justice, the pre-vote before the debate was 4 in favor, 13 opposed it, and 6 were abstaining. But at the vote after the debate, there had been a swing to the proposition. And the proposition got 13 votes in favor. So it went from 4 to 13, and the opposition went from 13 down to 8, and then 2 were abstaining. So the proposition took some from the opposition and 4 of the undecided. And with that, of course, won quite convincingly. So what I'm going to do in this short podcast is to say a little bit about what I think, in my humble opinion, what the proposition could have said and perhaps should have said that would have almost guaranteed them the victory. Now, it should be said that both of the teams in this particular debate were only told the motion on the night of the debate. So they only had a couple of hours to prepare, which I thought was, really quite impressive, how well both of them put forward cases on such short notice. And that was a particular concept that we had on that night. Usually you get, a week or 2 weeks to prepare. But on that night, only a couple of hours. And of course, I've had days, indeed weeks, to benefit from that fount of wisdom called hindsight. So please do not take this in any way as a criticism of those who debated on the night, for those who were there or those who participated. Absolutely not. It's just an attempt to learn from this and to think about what perhaps one can do in a future debate of a similar type. The fact is that many of the elements I shall mention here tonight were indeed present. The opposition had these elements in their case, but they didn't perhaps develop them enough. They didn't put them forward strongly enough for it to really make a difference in terms of keep holding on to the votes, which is all right. They had to do. If they could just hold on to those 13 votes, then that would probably been enough to win. And also, all debate meetings at 104 London Debaters are done under the Chatham House rule. The Chatham House rule, which says that we can talk about the things that were said, but never identify anyone by name. So never refer to a person, John said this and Mary said that, but we can talk about the arguments as long as we don't identify the person who said it. And that's simply because, many people will be assigned to defend something they disagree with or oppose perhaps something they personally actually do agree with. So people often have to say things that they don't really mean, and so it's really unfair to say that, well, Mary said this or that, because she didn't mean that. It's not her personal opinion. She's just putting forward an argument for the sake of the debate. In this debate, what could the opposition have done to avoid the swing, and what was it the proposition did actually to secure that swing? Now, after every debate at 104, we have a debate evaluation. And after this debate, we had one of our debate coaches, Ami Kotecha, who delivered that evaluation. And I will shamelessly steal some of her points, but also add, obviously, on my own points. Okay, so let me remind you, the motion was, this House believes kindness is more important than justice. So this clearly was what we call a value debate. generally debates fall into three categories. It's policy, value, or fact. Of course, there are many subcategories, and indeed, in most debates, there is a sort of overlap between these categories. Particularly, policy debates will almost always involve some degree of values. What you value most means you'll be more likely to support this policy or that policy. But the thing I want you to really notice about this motion is the wording. Okay, so the claim here is that kindness is more important than justice. And this is a very key point to notice. Because in order to be topical, as we say in debating terminology, i.e. addressing the motion, the proposition has the burden of proof to demonstrate that kindness is not only as important, okay, that's not enough, but that kindness is more important than justice, okay? And that is, in my opinion, what gives the proposition a good working chance, by really focusing in on the more. What I remember the proposition did extremely well in this debate was that their opening speaker, who has a very important role of setting the framework of the debate, did so rather brilliantly by showing through examples and logic how kindness was more or less a universal value, more eternal almost. Whereas justice, well, that chops and changes with different times and different cultures. Certainly what we regard as just, well, that's very different from what previous generations often regarded as just in many cases. And they follow this up with examples where the law had been applied in ways that we might today find unacceptable. And although I can't remember the exact examples they used, I think they used death penalty, for example. We could also mention that homosexual acts were illegal, things like that, which then later have been changed. And they had also other examples. And the point they made was that, well, if kindness had been applied to the justice system, it would actually be better, and these laws would have been better, and we are guided by kindness in sort of deciding what is just, and thus kindness must surely be more important. That was as I can remember, the gist of their case. Now, one can certainly question this sort of framing by pointing out that, well, yeah, laws change, but only to better reflect the true meaning of justice. And even if you agree with the proposition that it sometimes is right to set aside justice and show forbearance in the name of kindness or mercy, is it not also right sometimes to set kindness to one side in the name of justice? And notions of kindness also change over time, just as notions of justice may do, meaning that the proposition has at best demonstrated that they are sort of similar, that they are of equal importance. And remember, this is a key point, again, coming back to this focus of why we need to focus on the more. The opposition does not need to demonstrate that justice is more important. Okay, they do not need to prove the opposite. This is a mistake we often do when we're in opposition. We think that we have to almost prove the opposite, but we don't. All we have to do is demonstrate that they haven't proven that it is whatever it is they're claiming. We don't need to prove the opposite. But we need to show in a convincing way that really convinces the audience that the proposition has not actually proven their case. They haven't proven the motion, and that is the key. That is the key point. And in this case, we need to focus in. If we were on the opposition here, which I'm glad to say I wasn't, because that would be extremely difficult. And as I said, I was very impressed with the case they put forward. But what we would have to do is to focus in on the more than element, the more, that justice is more important, and that is not adequately proven by the proposition. Now, the opposition did have a very powerful rhetorical question they used, namely, what would you rather be denied, kindness or justice? This was, I think, the opposition's strongest point, and perhaps could have been developed more. I'm sure they would have done that if they had a bit more time to prepare. So again, I have the benefit of hindsight and time here. But if they could have used that more, if they could have elaborated on it and used it also consistently by all the opposition speakers, I think that could have worked much more powerfully in their favor. So one way they could have developed this point is that after asking the audience, what would they rather be denied? They could have said that surely that depends on the context, right? Depends on the context. Sometimes justice is more important, surely. But sometimes, obviously, kindness is. It depends. One is not always more important and shouldn't in all situations be prioritized over the other. And the proposition, they could have said, will have to prove that kindness is always and in all situations more important. Have they done so? So this is in an attempt to reframe the debate and to really increase the burden of proof on the proposition. Have they really proven that kindness should always be prioritized in all situations? Secondly, they could have directed a question to the proposition directly. And they could have asked, should kindness always be prioritized over justice? And in order to respond to that, the proposition will have to give us one of two answers. They will either have to say, yes, it should, or no, it shouldn't, right? There's only yes or no. You can answer this. And if they say yes, then, well, that's a very big burden. And have they really proven that justice should always, that kindness should always be prioritized? If they say no, that, well, no, sometimes kindness should be prioritized, but sometimes justice should be prioritized, then they haven't really proven the motion, because they are basically saying that they are both important and it depends on the situation. Now, the proposition may answer, well, yes, it should always be prioritized because it would not be kind to deny justice. Now, in that case, they have admitted that to be kind, you must be just. And so actually, the two values are at least equal. Indeed, if justice may be slightly more important, because you can be just without being kind, but you cannot be kind without also being just. So whether they answer yes or no, you can sort of corner them and say they have not really proven the motion that kindness is more important. Now, would that have won the debate on the night? Well, this is impossible to say. It depends on how the proposition responds and how the debate goes in general. But the main point is in this podcast is just to try and learn from the example of this sort of real debate. And in this case, how using a rhetorical question based on sort of a logical trap, really, to really try and trick up the other side and put them in a difficult situation. And as I keep saying, the key word of the motion is, of course, more. So you have to say, well, that means it must always be prioritized. So ask the audience, do you think kindness should always, in all situations, be prioritized? To which I think most people would say no. Okay, so then you sort of move them over to your side by framing and reframing the debate in that way. And aligning yourself with the value of the audience is absolutely necessary. If you don't do that, you will almost definitely lose the debate in almost every case. It makes it therefore more difficult for the proposition to defend their position, because now you've dragged it out of their framing. So they have to now either rebut your point or try and re-establish the framing of the debate to their advantage. They might, for example, try and say that, well, what we are saying is that it shouldn't always be prioritized, but on balance, in most cases, it should be prioritized, because the motion says that it's more important, but it doesn't mean that it should always be prioritized. And that would be, I think, a feasible defense. Not always, but in most cases, making it more important on balance. Again, to this, the opposition could then come back and say that, well, I think we need to re-stress here that that isn't really proving the motion, and it clearly shows that justice and kindness are both important, more or less equally, but it depends on the context. And we cannot know in each individual case what is most important, because we cannot know all cases, right? And so therefore we cannot know whether one or the other is more important in most cases, as the proposition is claiming here. Because, we can't know all cases, essentially. The only thing we can say with certainty is that in each individual case, we have to consider what is more important in this case, justice or kindness. And this must be looked at in each individual case, looking at the individual circumstances, because both are more or less equally important until we know the specifics of each case. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the motion has not been proven and should be defeated. So let me recap. Point 1 is pay close attention to the wording of the motion. There's always a clue in the wording that can help you to win the debate. In this case, it was the word more. Secondly, use rhetorical questions where you can. Rhetorical questions and points are powerful and can help you to reframe the debate. It can help you to also trap the other side and sort of make them have to answer a question that they really don't want to answer, and that can be a good thing to help the audience to see it your way. And C, obviously elaborate your strongest point rather than machine gun the audience with a barrage of points, which can really only confuse them. They won't remember everything you said, but if you can elaborate your strongest point or points, repeat them and make them vivid, use examples, use rhetorical points, but really emphasize your strongest point. Those were my thoughts, and I hope you found that useful. Even if you weren't at the debate, I think these points are still useful and helpful, and I would recommend that you look at the website of the club for more information. There's a blog there as well. And of course, if you haven't listened to it yet, the podcast on rebuttal goes very much along the same theme as this podcast, but looks more at the sort of general principles involved and the various techniques that you can use. Whatever side you're on, whether you're on proposition or opposition, you will need to do rebuttal as part of the debate. And so the podcast on rebuttal is really helpful and useful, and I recommend it to you. Thank you. You've been listening to the Debating Toastcast. Feel free to leave a comment, critical or encouraging. We welcome both. And if you'd like more information about joining the club or coming first as a guest, please have a look at our website, 104londondebaters.club, or send us an email on info@104londondebaters.club. That's info@104londondebaters.club. Thank you for listening.